And we have gotten way off task here. We still have four more quarantine watches to go. Oh, we've recommended some great movies, though, so no one should feel like they don't have anything to watch. But your fourth movie, my favorite movie on your list, actually. I just now saw it for the first time,
Oh,
and
good.
it by and far won the best movie on your list, in my opinion. Of course, your list is different, and I see why you made the choices you did, but go ahead, let's hear it.
Okay, another isolation movie. It's Moon, starring Sam Rockwell. Came out in 2009, somewhere around there. Um, he is working on the moon, harvesting something. If I remember right, I didn't rewatch this. He's
Helium
harvesting
3.
helium-3. Yeah, he's harvesting that on the moon, and he's the only person there, and he's been working for who knows how long, months and months. They probably say in the movie, and it's just him, and then a pre Me Too era Kevin Spacey voice of the robot, or his HAL 9000 version. Uh, and it's awesome. You're just watching a guy living on the moon doing his work, isolated from everything, and I don't want to really even say the nature of the ending because I think that would even just spoil it. But I would say sitting there watching one guy for however long the movie is, an hour 45 minutes or whatever, is worth it for the way this movie concludes.
This movie to me it's the equivalent to shaking a Christmas present, knowing there's something on your list inside, but the payoff definitely comes through in a big way at the end because you think it's one item, but it turns out to be your big ticket item. And this is my weird metaphor to try and avoid giving away the ending. But Sam Rockwell, first of all, doesn't get enough work in my opinion. I think he's fantastic. I was excited he was in this. And if you've ever, if you find yourself, as humans, this is another one where with technology, we've got Siri, we've got our Google Assistant. If you've got a Samsung phone, you've got Bixby. We rely on this artificial intelligence, and I think for it being in 2009, plays an important. I got a little cat hair on my face. That's fantastic. Plays an important role, and if you haven't seen Moon, I highly recommend it. Somehow I made it 11 years without seeing it, but I'll be watching it again soon. I definitely think, like I said, my favorite movie on your list. It reminds me, like you said, you brought up HAL. It reminds me a lot of what I felt the first time I saw 2001: A Space Odyssey. But it's not as long. It's not as slow. I mean, there's definitely the slow elements to it, but payoff makes it all worth it.
Yeah, space is a great setting. I wanted to put a lot more on the list, and if it was longer, there'd definitely be more. If you saw Ad Astra, the Brad Pitt space movie that came out last year, Gravity is isolating. A lot of movies, 2001, a lot of movies that take place in space fit really well in this quarantine category, and I thought that Moon was probably the best example.
Yeah, I didn't even have the adventure sense to go to space on my list. But yeah, that's a really good point observation there. Brings us to my number 4. If it's got that cult following, I wouldn't say it's the biggest success in horror movies, but it's a really intriguing concept. And number 4 is Pontypool. If you haven't seen Pontypool, first of all, there's a little bit of narcissism in every list I make, and yes, radio stations coming up again. But this one, the whole concept, the radio station's super important because it involves, it's a zombie movie, and it involves the way it's spreading, because it's not spreading in a traditional sense. I don't want to give away what's actually going on here, but did you watch Pontypool?
I could not find Pontypool, and I really want to watch it. It's one of 2 movies that I didn't watch on your list, but I was hoping there were going to be 2 that you didn't watch for my list, so I wouldn't feel bad. But I will
Pontypool,
watch it.
yeah, it's one that you definitely need to find. I will track it down for you because first of all, it scratches that radio station itch. Secondly, it's got a lot of originality. I don't know how much research you've done into it, but the concept behind it kind of reinvents the zombie genre a little bit. Traditionally, it spreads in one way, but this takes a completely creative, unexpected element. I'd put it in any top 10 list of movies if someone said, "Hey, looking to get into horror, what should I watch?" It definitely makes my top 10. I think it's, like I said, it's kind of got a cult following. It's not the biggest success, but it's definitely worth checking out if you haven't.
What's the background of the production of the movie? When did it come out? And is it American?
Really, Pontypool, it's not American. It came out in 2008, and it's actually an adaptation of a book called Pontypool. No, yeah, it's Canadian. It's an adaptation of Pontypool Changes Everything, which is a book. And let's see if I can pull up the handy dandy budget, because I don't think the budget was that large, because it's really not that complex.
I'm gonna pull it up as well.
What we got here?
Pontypool. Directed by Bruce McDonald.
Yeah, I'm not finding the budget, of course, but I don't think it was very high. Because, of course, I'm using the IMDb app to navigate.
Yeah, it definitely had me intrigued from the description on IMDb, which is a radio host. Or should I say anything? Is this one you recommend just jumping into?
I would absolutely recommend just jumping into it. It's worth watching. It's only 93 minutes, so if you got an hour and a half, it's not gonna hurt you too much. Came out in 2009. It was filmed in 2008, but it definitely has. If you love, to me, it's almost a natural extension of the concept behind War of the Worlds and what it did to society, the radio broadcast.
Okay.
I mean, from a radio fan standpoint, definitely worth checking out. From a horror film standpoint, also worth checking out. So I'd say just jump in and get your feet wet. I'll see if I can't track down a link for you. But yeah, Pontypool, you need to see it. Your number 3.
My number 3 is The Big Sick, another big movie. I had The Big Chill on here, and I probably would have added The Big Short on another type of list because I love that movie. But The Big Sick is a true-to-life movie about Kumail Nanjiani, the actor from Silicon Valley and other things. This is where I first just fell in love with the guy. Most people probably know him now from that Instagram post because he's now jacked because he's a Marvel superhero. And he posted a picture of him and it just exploded on the internet. But his wife, when they met, he didn't realize this. They both found it out because she went to the hospital and into a coma, that she was immunosensitive or had some kind of immunodeficiency. I'm not sure what the terminology would be, but it happened right towards the beginning of their relationship, if the movie is completely true to life. And it shows him bonding with the parents as they're waiting for her to come out of the coma and seeing if she's going to live or not. And I chose the movie because I guess if you want to relate it to what's going on, just it helps you remember who we got immunocompromised friends to look out for, and that's part of the social distancing stuff. But they're also, his real wife is not the one who plays her in the movie. They're doing a podcast now about being stuck in quarantine. And it's sort of like a chapter 2 to the movie because he's just panicking all the time because he doesn't know, is he going to bring something home he shouldn't? What can they go out and do? Can they get takeout? All sorts of things. And so I rewatched it the other day, and it just kind of works as a quarantine movie. It's also very light. It's enjoyable. It's a comedy. small indie comedy, and I loved it. It's got a lot of heart too. It's one of my favorite movies of that year, whichever year it was.
I'll say, looking at both of our lists, it's the most uplifting and positive one on there. It's kind of fits that indie rom-com niche, and I mean, I love the love story. I also love that you chose a movie called The Big Sick. It's worth checking out. I
Yeah.
can see why you put it at number 3. As someone who doesn't watch a lot of rom-coms, it's really not that hard to watch. Like, usually they're very tropey. You don't find that here. I think because it's autobiographical, I think it kind of avoids some of the cheesiness that pushes me away from those movies. But I think it's a solid recommendation.
Yeah, and it comes from I mean, if you're a fan of his comedy, like you're probably going to enjoy the movie. He's a funny guy. He's not going out there making 10 Things I Hate About You. You know, that's not even that bad of one. What's a terrible rom-com?
Yeah, like 10 Things I Hate About You. I don't know. I think anything with Hugh Grant.
Yeah, some of those. He's not making My Best Friend's Wedding. We'll say that, even though he's.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely a. Don't let the fact that it's a rom-com push you away. It's definitely a good watch. Yeah, my number 3. Had you seen 28 Days Later before now?
I had, yeah.
That one seemed obvious to me. By now everyone's seen it. I don't feel like there's a whole lot that needs to be said. It's what introduced me to Cillian Murphy, and I don't know how you feel about him as an actor, but my God, the man can do some acting. Have you?
I like Cillian Murphy. He's not like one of my favorite actors. I don't rush to see his movies, but I do go see every Christopher Nolan movie, and so I've seen him several times in the theaters.
He's going to be in A Quiet Place too, so there's that to look forward to when that eventually hits the streets. But 28 Days Later is probably, I'm not even going to go probably, it's definitely my favorite zombie movie, which is a category. As far as horror goes, I know my list has a lot of them. It's my least favorite in the horror genre, but I think 28 Days is the most gut-wrenching, but it also has that isolating aspect where he wakes up alone. And I think it's a really compelling way to, all of a sudden you're just dropped into this, and he's having to figure everything out as he goes. So from a human survival standpoint, 28 Days Later, definitely my favorite zombie flick.
Yeah, it's up there for me. I'm a fan of the older ones, the slower zombies. But I think
that was actually, I think that's what I wrote here was scary ass fast zombies. What do you do?
Yeah, and another relation to right now is that you see all these pictures coming out of, in Nashville. We see the pictures of Broadway just empty. See pictures of New York empty, and somehow they were able to just shut down London and shoot, all this footage with no one there. It's really incredible when you think about the fact that they were not shooting during a pandemic. And also, it's Danny Boyle, right, that directed?
Yes.
Yeah, so, I mean, you're in good hands there.
All right, your number 2 was, wow. Another one I hadn't seen before now, but all I can say about this one is, wow. What's your number 2?
My number 2 is The Lighthouse. I wanted to have a more recent movie on the list, and I think it's the perfect movie to watch in quarantine if you're stuck with a roommate that you don't necessarily get along with. I think we've all had those at some point in our lives, and that's really where relating to this movie ends, because what it is they're on an island with the lighthouse, and it's Willem Dafoe and what's his face, the new Batman.
Robert Pattinson.
Yeah, Robert Pattinson. And probably the best role I've seen him in, although I don't watch a lot of his movies. He is a really great actor, and in this movie, he's really scruffy. And so is Willem Dafoe, who is always that way. And they start slowly going crazy, being confined with each other, and you don't really know what's going on. It's filmed or directed by the guy that did The Witch a few years ago, if you've seen that, which was incredible.
So good.
Robert Eggers, I think is his name. and it's shot in an old style aspect ratio. It's almost a square. I don't know the specific ratio, but it's almost a square. It's in black and white, and it is just the shot composition is incredible to sound film nerdy there, but I couldn't look away from the screen, and at the same time, I was like, "What am I watching the whole time?"
This is exactly what I was talking about, though. That paranoia that kind of rings home for me in movies like this. This definitely had that in spades. To further extend it, if Edgar Allan Poe lived now and got into movies instead of poetry, this would be him. It
Totally.
oozes that style. There's that darkness, and I mean, black and white with that stylized look. Just and yeah, Robert Pattinson I think damaged his career, his reputation a lot with Twilight because he is a fantastic actor. Of course, I love Willem Dafoe. The man's a nut, but I'm hard pressed to find anything that I've not liked Willem Dafoe in. The closest, I guess, would be the Green Goblin and Spider-Man, but
That was
even that,
great.
yeah, even then he fit the role. I think that's nothing against him, but the Lighthouse was
I'd say that again. I
easily
think we
number
lost.
two. I said the
We lost.
Lighthouse is watch. I would definitely.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So that was my 2019 pick for the list.
It's a good one. I'm glad you put that on there. I went back to the early 2000s with one that seems so obvious, but based on interactions I've had with other humans, it's really accurate. 2002 is a cabin fever. You got Sean from Boy Meets World. You got a flesh-eating virus. You got Joey Kern. Fun fact that the movie was originally called Waffles. It was called Waffles at
Waffles.
one point, and it was also called Country Hams. But Eli Roth, easily his best flick. But seeing the way they deal with this flesh-eating bacteria coming into their cabin they're camping at, it's a bunch of teens, college kids, camping in a cabin, and they're dealing with this flesh-eating bacteria. But I have seen either in the news or in my personal life, each aspect of the paranoia play out. You've got one guy who just runs out to the woods and hides in a cave. And if you haven't seen Cabin Fever, I recommend it. What were your feelings on it?
Well, this is the second of the movies that I haven't watched, and you're gonna hate that because I have never watched an Eli Roth movie because it's something that I don't think I would enjoy. But obviously, as I dig deeper into different subgenres of horror, it's something I'm going to have to start getting into. And this one was really just a time thing. I would have watched it because, from what I gather and just the way that it appeals to me from not seeing it, this is the one that I would enjoy the most. And also it has Sweet Lou from Grind in it.
Yes, it does. Cabin Fever isn't, by no means is it a masterpiece of cinematography or storytelling. It's definitely a fun. It's more you're going in to almost laugh at the way these kids are handling this situation. It's very, I mean, it's not campy per se, but it definitely it wasn't ever going to win any Oscars. I call it a fun watch. My wife disagrees. As far as Eli Roth goes, he's very hit or miss for me. Some movies he does a fantastic job with, some not so much. Cabin Fever is definitely in the positives column. So I'll leave you with that. You need to check it out. Your number one is arguably one of the best paranoia-related movies ever made, and I'll let you go ahead and talk about it.
Yeah, so my last one was a newer movie, and this one's much older. Alfred Hitchcock's Rear Window, which I posted this when I watched it a couple weeks ago, rewatched it a couple weeks ago, that it's the perfect quarantine movie. And I think that it really is. So the plot is you got Jimmy Stewart. He's a photographer. He's, I believe, photographing a Formula One race or some kind of car race. And he gets hit by a crash and breaks his leg. So he's confined to his apartment. The most incredible apartment I've ever seen on a movie. The set design is just so, you just want to live there, other than the fact that there could be a murderer living there. And he picks up a habit of watching all of his neighbors. And so you see all these different little sub stories going on throughout the film. And he's also dating Grace Kelly, and for some reason is fearing commitment with, you know, a human goddess that's is looking incredible in this movie. And it's just fun. I mean, if someone doesn't like old movies that's listening, it's one of the ones that's watchable. It's not in black and white. It's a great concept that's, it just keeps you tied to it the entire time. And he thinks he might see a murderer in one of the windows, and some other people are skeptical. You've probably seen copycat versions of it. Disturbia is one. There's another one I noticed the other day, but now I'm blanking on what that was. But it's great.
I think Hitchcock is the classic storyteller of that genre. I mean, I don't think there are a whole lot of people out there that would argue with me on that. I think Hitchcock did something that we see a lot less of now. He was a storyteller. With all of his movies, there's definitely a story that you get fully immersed in. He doesn't rush it necessarily. And I think Rear Window is fantastic. I think it holds up. I think it stands well enough on its own. And I'm going to go with Disturbia didn't even need to be made.
No, it didn't. But you know what? I still watch it. I mean, I don't watch it, but I still enjoy it because I've just been a huge Shia LaBeouf fan ever since I was like 13 years old watching Even Stevens. He's a love him or hate him kind of guy. I don't understand why people don't like him.
He's been good in so many things. Disturbia wasn't one that I was overly thrilled with. I think it came out around the same time as Transformers, and I really didn't like Transformers. So I think I was probably in the phase. And maybe I need to go back and do myself a favor and rewatch. But I just lumped
There's nothing new.
Done. Yeah, no, there's definitely nothing new. It's just a more modern retelling. But Rear Window, definitely a fantastic number one choice. Mine is just straight out of the quarantine playbook. My number one is, of course, Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. I don't want to hear any of the nonsense that it differs from the book. Stephen King was on a lot of cocaine when he wrote it. Stanley Kubrick was drinking a lot when he filmed it. They're two different things. Jack Nicholson is a godsend. Shelley Duvall probably ruined her mental state making the movie, but it is easily
Stanley Kubrick ruined her mental state.
Yeah, that's a good point. You can't blame that on Shelley. That's not really fair, but one of the most fantastic movies in my opinion. It really sets a mood of how easily you can go nuts when you're isolated. But Shining is easily my number one. What are your thoughts on The Shining? Because I don't think I've ever picked your brain about that one.
Well, I love The Shining. I don't kind of go down the rabbit hole with the theories of everything having, every little tiny detail having some meaning. If you've ever seen, what's the room number, room 237 or something like that? Yeah. But as a movie, it's a genius without. So just watch it and love it. And the sequel is not bad either. It's totally a different take on it's a different atmosphere. It's a different feel. The sequel that just came out last year, Dr. Sleep.
So Dr. Sleep is good, worth watching.
Worth watching if you're a huge. I don't know. I mean, if you're a big fan of The Shining, you're going to go either way with your reaction to it because there is a creature feature aspect to this, to Dr. Sleep. But if you go in knowing that you're talking about one of the greatest films ever made, not just horror films, and you're watching a sequel to that, you're just setting yourself up for bad expectations.
But there we have it. Oh, go ahead.
I was just bringing it back to The Shining.
Yeah, Dr. Sleep's on my list to check out. I'm scared because part of The Shining for me was the music, the atmosphere, the feeling it has, and I worry that Dr. Sleep won't have that. That's fine because the book is a different story, and Stephen King wrote it like a long time after, so it's just not going to be the same. But I'll definitely take that recommendation under advisement and check it out. But I thank you very much for joining me. We'll post our two lists. I'll post them with this, and hope you're doing well, Rudy.
Thanks, man. I hope everyone that's listening is, taking care of themselves and staying clean.